What's up, everyone? Thank you for watching today's review. We're going to look at Jason Bourne, the latest installment in the Bourne trilogy. So we're going to get to that right now. So let's get right to it. I mean, Jason Bourne, just a fantastic character. Who's always been surrounded by just a really good storyline. Really good plot, really good ideas, action sequences. We're all familiar with what the trilogy involves. A former assassin trained by the government who one day blows a gasket and doesn't remember who he is or why he's doing any of this or why he's able to do the things that he can do, just these amazing abilities. And so, we love it. It's been around forever. And so to have this one finally come out after all these years, everybody, including myself, of course, was completely on board. So I was very excited to see that one. This one, as you know, was directed by Paul Greengrass, which did a couple of the last, I think, Bourne Ultimatum, Bourne Supremacy. However, the first one, The Bourne Identity, was directed by Doug Liman, who, to this day, in my opinion, the first one, of course, is always, it's the best one, I think. So the cast in this movie, it's a pretty good cast. Of course, we have Matt Damon, Tommy Lee Jones, who was, I thought he was going to croak in the movie because he's so old, but, he managed to pull it off. It's not like the Tommy Lee that we know from, say, Under Siege. Alicia Vikander, she's amazing. She's basically the Pamela Landy of this new Bourne film, and she does a wonderful job. I have nothing to say about her. She's a great actor. She's really the female lead in this movie, and so she does really good. Vincent Castle, the main villain in the movie, I think he was well cast as well. He had that look, he had that fierce, vengeful spirit that this person needed to have, to play out this hate toward Jason Bourne. And so, other than that, though, yeah. So I'm going to go through a few points, and we'll see if we can, get right to it for you. So, first of all, just the fact that Julia Stiles is back, was really cool. She's always been good in the movies, and she dies early on. They put an end to her character, which I think was a big mistake. But of course, you can't have two female leads in the movie, which is why they cut her out. Anyhow, the movie starts out, with her, and she's kind of, trying to bring up some old files to help Bourne remember who he is. And, fast forward, her and Jason Bourne end up in a country filled with riots and rioting. And the ops team, they're trying to locate her. And she's like the only one in the movie with long blonde hair. I mean, it's not even covered up. So obviously they were making it very easy for her character to be killed off because, anyone with 2 cents, if you wanted to get past, the assassins who were looking for you, you would have at least, been smart enough to cover up your blonde hair in a country where there's not really any blonde people. So, but, and again, the camera wasn't, the friendliest to her. She has aged. She still looks good. She's still a great actress. But, I still love her. I would have liked to have seen her maybe assist the other female lead in the movie. That would have been cool. But there can only be one as it goes. Riz Ahmed, the guy who plays basically the, kind of a Steve Jobs type character, a guy who's, the head of a major technology company called Deep Dream. And I love Riz. I think he's a great actor. He's very original. And Nightcrawler, if you remember Nightcrawler, he was the lead co-star in that movie. and he's just fantastic. However, it has been said that his whole problem, his dilemma with the government in the movie, detracts from the story, and so there is a little bit of that going on, and they try to fuse it together. But sometimes along, when you're watching the movie, you're like, well, how does this tie in with Jason Bourne? And so, I mean, there's still two different ideas going on there. First you have Jason Bourne. He's still on this trip where he still wants to find out more. He remembers, so he's getting more flashbacks about his dad and how his dad actually was the one who created the program. And but once he found out that his son was really nominated, he was the best one who could volunteer for the program. Well, that didn't go over so well. So, but what else? I really want to talk about the trailer for a minute. Because trailers are an art of themselves. They are designed to to give you all the best cuts, all the best scenes, wrap it up in one big package, so you're going to go see the movie. That's the whole idea behind a trailer. It's not just to show you, okay, here's some of the movie. They tease you and they lie to you. And I think the biggest disappointment for me was, they turn Jason Bourne into this like Rambo 3 character, right? Remember that scene in Rambo 3 where he's like, he's been on his own, just like Jason Bourne. He left it all behind, and now he's fighting for money, and he goes in there and he kicks ass, and he does what he has to survive. But in the trailer, if you can remember, we see a front angle of Jason Bourne, where he's getting ready to fight. And he clocks this guy, and in one punch, the guy goes down like a stone, and you're anticipating that when you're ready to watch the movie. It's like, okay, I'm ready for that fight scene. And what do? They totally pull out the rug from underneath you. They show the scene, but they show it from behind. So you have Jason Bourne, you see his back, he knocks this guy out, and that's it. I mean, There's we totally lost. I think they could have created that whole fight scene. It could have been a really, cool and engaging part of the movie. Maybe even a couple more fights. He does do another fight in there, but I mean, just to tease us like that in the trailer and not show, that at least show the angle. I mean, it's just so definitely a bad move there. So let's move on here. I'm a computer guy. I love computers. I've always been drawn to the Bourne movies because there's such a heavy, technological kind of hacking element to it. We're using technology to track people down, which was another prime idea in the movie. It was all about really technology and, and people's privacy and, all this kind of stuff. That's where Riz Ahmed comes in, that guy. But again, just a great use of all that technology in the movie, and it's really what kind of drives the movie along, because the whole movie, if you think about it, is based off of, the use of technology, to create this action. You got comms, you have operations, you have phone hacking, laptops, and all kinds of stuff. And so if you're into technology and you like that kind of stuff, the movie has always possessed that, and so I've always really loved that. But I mean, let's just talk a little bit about the car chase scene. I love a good car chase scene. Who doesn't? However, they seem to go on a little bit too long. And they even get a little absurd. It's like the villain in the movie. He has a chance to escape this casino, and he has multiple chances. You wonder what he's trying to do. Is he still trying to, go after Jason Bourne, or is he just trying to get out of Dodge? And so, but if he's trying to escape, to get out of there, he does everything that, you wouldn't do, which is attract all this attention to yourself, steal an SWAT vehicle and terrorize Vegas, but let's jump to the villain's death, which again was another disappointment. We're talking about creativity here. We're talking about, how can you How can you, act out? You have an idea for a scene. You want this guy to die. That's fine. Yes, he needs to die. Jason Bourne is the one that needs to kill him. However, some of the stuff is so, for lack of a better word, simplistic and boring that it lacks creativity. It's just like, so what happens is Jason finally catches up with the head bad guy, and they end up in some like sewer alley, and they just have a fight. I mean, good fight scene. Nothing wrong with the fight scene, but in the end, all he does is just snap his neck. I say what makes a good death for a villain is a violent death. Not just snapping the guy's neck. I mean, whatever. It could have been done a lot better. And but I mean, some of the pluses about the movie. I liked the movie. I was disappointed. I wasn't crazy about it, but definitely some of the good points about the movie, I would have to say, was Alicia Vikander. She was the one who really added a lot of that kind of suspenseful, kind of keeping you tuned in along the way. I would say probably even more so than Jason Bourne himself. Jason Bourne almost was just kind of like along for the ride for everything else that was happening in the movie. And he strongs arms this guy to give him answers. It's like, tell me why, tell me why. I'm like, move on, bro. I mean, you're Jason Bourne. You have these mad skills. You can go anywhere and be anyone. And the movie could have went in a completely different direction. But there's all kinds of Hollywood and movie politics going on there, and so. But that's how it goes. So I mean, in conclusion, I would say the biggest disappointment, the biggest lack of creativity in the film was the ending itself. It's almost like you're trying to recapture, this old glory from the old movies, with the endings and everything. And it's a cheap copy. It's like, why do you have to do a cheap copy of the ending from the last one? If you remember from the last ones, they always had that Moby Dick Extreme Ways song. That's how they finished it. And that was like a Jason Bourne song. Amazing song. I love that song. It could have been used differently, but the way it was used in the ending, it was like a cheap karaoke version. It had some of those melodic, familiar lines that you hear about that, but they used that at the end, and it was just weak. But aside from the music, everyone parts ways, and then finally, Jason Bourne meets, I honestly forgot her name in the movie, Heather Lee, I think it is, and they meet up, and she asks him to join forces, and he's like, let me think about it. And the whole time he's like filming her previous conversation in the car that she had with the director of the FBI, saying that she would basically, put him down or kill him if he didn't want to cooperate. And so he finds out about that, and he ends up leaving her, her own recording, like, oh, am I supposed to be, freaked out? In the old movies, you had Jason Bourne at the top of a building, describing what somebody was doing or what they look like. And, they're on the phone with them, and then they find out and they turn around and it's like, oh, he's looking at me. That was new. That was kind of new for the movie because he was spying on them. But this was a different kind of like, I'm going to spy on you, and, I can do this because I'm Jason Bourne. I'm so cool. I'm one step ahead of you is what really the idea is there. But man, it just, again, too simplistic, too boring. The ending, it's fine if you want to leave an ending to segue into another movie in the future, which may happen or may not, but we don't know that, and so you need to have something far more intensive and more thought-provoking to leave us with. Jason walking off into the sunset, so, I mean, that's what it was. It's a good movie. I would see it again. I will see it again when it comes out. But, go see it for yourself. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I give this about a 6.5 on the Jason Bourne Richter scale. So please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing a lot more movie reviews. We're going to be taking a look at Suicide Squad next week. So stay tuned for that. Please subscribe and have a good day.